Significant blessing to our intellectual community here. So, this engagement provides our students and faculty with direct international atmospheres, international perspectives, which greatly enriching our intellectual, let's say, discourse, okay, coloring our intellectual activities here in this university. And Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, like Ahmad Mafkur said earlier, that today Professor Reza Zakir will be sharing with us a very important and contemporary issue, that is developing an anthropologically based research map on Islamic studies. And I think this topic is instrumental in expanding the methodological sophistication and practical relevance of our research in Islamic studies. So we look forward to the insight that Prof. Reza Shakir will share with us today. And before we proceed, half of the rector of the university, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the postgraduate program, specifically to the director and team, for their diligent effort for organizing this valuable academic event. And finally, thank you to every member of the audience, faculty, staff, and students for your attendance. And last but not least, with the hope that this guest lecture will bring benefit and open new horizons for our research community, I formally declare this guest lecture open by reciting Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bapak Ibu, I think that's all from me. Okay, thank you once again, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Redi Irwan,
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh,
the Vice Rector, and Bapak Ibu, Bapak Direktur Pasca, dan semuanya. And now, let's proceed to the next session, which is the guest lecture session by Professor Reza Shakir from University of Amsterdam, that who will talk about developing anthropologically based research on Islamic studies. I will be here all the time when there is a question session, and also there is some point that I need to translate into Indonesia. As much as I can, I will do the translation also for the lectures. All right, for Professor Reza Shakir, floor is yours.
Yeah. Can you see this?
Yeah.
It's coming. Yeah. We can see it now.
Okay, perfect. Okay. First of all, Assalamu'alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's truly an honor to be invited to share my research. During the past couple of years, I've been working a lot on Southeast Asia. For my postdoc, when I was working in Leiden, and when I've got a program in Singapore, also was working with Southeast Asian data. And and also when I was working on my Ph.D. a couple of years ago, also came up with an anthropological approach to studying Islam, and in an unfortunately not positive way, Islamophobic approaches in Europe. And considering all this trajectory, when your esteemed university asked me to prepare some lectures, and actually I really enjoyed it and took the opportunity in this time to predominantly focus on my trajectory and organize it in a way that provide several ways to studying Islam anthropologically, of course. So I'm going to just introduce myself very briefly, and again I'm going to focus on my presentation and two more, and hopefully we'll come. First and foremost, my name is Reza Shaker or Shocker. People prefer Shaker, but I'm Shocker. And I'm currently a guest researcher at Leiden University, Institute of Cultural Anthropology and Development Sociology. At the same time, also I'm a postdoc researcher at Amsterdam Institute for Social Science Research, or AISSR. Before we begin, I would like to provide you with a roadmap of what we are going to explore during these three guest lectures. I have designed these lectures to actually respond directly to what your program asked me. So, which is developing an anthropologically based research map towards Islamic studies. So, if you allow me, I would like to show or explain how these three presentations connect and why they matter for your own research journey, hopefully, especially master's and postgrad students. Today, in the first session, and hopefully, inshallah, for the upcoming two, sorry, dive into how I share my fieldwork during my PhD and how young Muslims in Europe experience othering, and I will explain what othering means later. So this is somehow classic anthropological work involving interviews, participant observation, deep attention to the body and the senses. It shows what traditional anthropological methods can reveal about everyday Muslim life in Europe. And then for the second session, we move on to from streets of Amsterdam and Leipzig and Turku and Tallinn, for different European cities, to Indonesian context, your own context, on especially social media. I will present my research on green Islam on YouTube and TikTok. So here you will see how we can use digital methods and computational tools to study Islamic debates at scale. It's a big data approach. This directly relevant to your context because the data comes directly from Indonesia. And hopefully in the third and final session, we go even further into digital methods, because this is what I am lately work a lot, and this is quite a trend in social science and the humanities, so some sort of digital turn in social science and humanities. I will show how a 35 years of study of intersection of AI and Islam in Singapore newspaper looks like. This demonstrates how computational methods, big data, text mining approaches can help us understand the long-term patterns in religious discourse. Now, you probably ask why I have structured these three guest lectures in this way. Well, I want you to see a methodological spectrum. We start with bodies and senses, very tangible, very everyday, towards digital and social media platforms, and of course, at the end, the large text data, big data, AI related. So from embodied to very disembodied. Each approach has its own strength. Each answers different kind of questions, but all of them are legitimate ways to do anthropology of Islam in 21st century. My goal is not to just share my feeling and my findings. I want to equip you with the ideas and tools that hopefully we all can adapt to our own research project and thesis. especially for postgrad and master's students. Whether you are studying Islamic law, Sharia, economics, religious education, or any other field, all related to anthropology of Islam, these methods can open new doors for your own research and project. So think of these as a journey we travel from embodied and intimate to a digital and big data scale. Along the way, I hope you find these in also my talk inspiration for your own anthropologically grounded work on Islam. And of course, I would very much like to be in contact with you and master student, have some conversation what's happening with your own research and how, for example, I would help you out, hopefully, inshallah. So today, let's start off with my own PhD project. Took me 4 years to finish it. I want to share with you the research that examines a seemingly mundane space. I will work on public transport, bus, tram, train, these everyday spaces that actually talks and reveals profound dynamics around othering, discrimination, and everyday Islamophobia. We'll explore how young Muslims experience riding buses, trams, or train in 4 European cities, Amsterdam in Netherlands, Tallinn in Estonia, Leipzig in Germany, and Turku in Finland. And all of these experiences to tell us about contemporary Europe and the way that Muslims actually live and being religious in Europe mean. Before we dive in, let me briefly show you that this presentation, today's talk, draws upon several published researches. You can see a collection of articles I've published with my colleagues on these topics, explaining sensorial encounters, corporeal experiences, affective dimension, and agency of young Muslims in European cities and public transport systems. You can also see my book, Encountering the Other, which synthesizes all of almost works. So these publications actually examine different European cities and different dimensions of embodied experience of othering and Islamophobia, which actually I will be sharing today. This is what I'm going to do. Hopefully, this is our roadmap. We'll start off with no introduction to help us understand why public transport matters. In a very simply, public transport is a metaphor, is a entry point to a broader aspects of assortments of public spaces, and is used as a proxy to understand how actually encounters happens and how tension actually arises. Then I'll explain what the Muslim other means, or who the Muslim other is, how Muslim experience and perceived in contemporary Europe. I present my research question and of course methodology, and I want you to understand not just what I found, but also how I found my research results. At the heart of the presentation, it will be the findings. So I'll organize it around 3 aspects of embodied othering. So sensorial, corporeal, and affective forms of othering, all of which are, one way or another related to the body and embodiment. And hopefully we have a conclusion and I have some reflection. And I very much look forward to our Q&As, have your takes on my work and both methodology and finding. So let's begin by situating public transport as a research site. Public transport is a key site of intercultural negotiation. With that, I would call different part of O, other with capital O, and others with a small o. And tell you what I mean by a small o and capital O. The small o other is simply someone outside our immediate network. A stranger can be an other, and someone who is not our family or friend, someone we know, but at the same time it doesn't pose any danger. For example, simply a stranger becomes an other. But other with capital O is someone different. The other, again with capital O, is typically a member of dominated outgroups, someone whose identity is fundamentally different from the majority, may even pose some threat and danger to us. So othering, in this case, this concept is a process through which difference gets translated into inferiority. And it's how we draw a line between us and them. It's a very classic way of approaching and constructing identity based on the popular assumption about what counts as the normal, standard self, and the body. And that's the way, actually, public transport brings all these dynamics together. It's a space where encounters with strangers are unavoidable. You have no other way to mingle with other people on the bus or tram or metro or train. And we will see, actually, depending on whose body you inhabit in public transport, these encounters can be, sorry? Oh, so these encounters can radically be different, from very mild smile to very hostile, maybe encounter, and maybe even physical aggression, unfortunately, at some point. So, in a very formal definition of other, and we can talk about it, as David Campbell argued, is a network of beliefs, processes, and practices that produces a particular kind of self and body. So it becomes a standard corporeal or corporeal standard that is projected as the perfect species, typical, and therefore fully and essential human. And any deviation from this definition or this fully human renders the other and danger. So, what does this mean in practice is that there is an unmarked body in a European context, usually white, Christian, European, abled body, and against which other bodies are measured and found lacking. So any deviation from this, norm or normal body is basically something wrong. So when you deviate from this somatic norm, your body becomes marked, visible, subject of scrutiny. This isn't just about attitude or beliefs. Othering is practice, performed and lived. It happens in everyday spaces through everyday interaction. And that's where public transport comes to the picture. And the whole othering happens through encounter. So, but what do I mean by encounter? Encounters are an anticipated exposure to difference. They're about surprise, they're about sometimes shock, potentially conflict even. They are moments when you come face to face with someone or something unexpected. And encounters have conscious aspect, direct attention to material, environmental, or human features of a space that get registered in everyday life through our bodies. But here's what's crucial. Encounter is the process through which others become familiar or registered or identified and known. When you, for example, see someone, when you hear something, when you smell a strange scent, smell, this is a moment that you register the difference or the familiarity or the distance between you and the object or person, and that's through which, through this encounter, the othering or the other is registered or becomes known, for example. Or conversely, through these encounters, they remain a stranger. So someone is very distant, something is very apart, stay out of place. So throughout our lived experience, we encounter our bodies, other bodies, and register familiarity and strangeness. So the other aid through these encounters, through bodily appearance, through considering differences between familiar and what is unfamiliar. So, why public transport matters, again, is a metaphor or a proxy towards introducing or studying different urban public spaces. So public transport is a sort of intense bodily encounters. It brings together strangers with previously unrelated trajectory in very close proximity within very limited spaces. It's a space where difference as part of everyday social routine is lived and experienced. You cannot, it's obviously impossible to avoid other passengers. You can't create your own share, your own bus. You have to share your bus with other people. A bus or a tram is in any ways a microcosm of urban multiculturalism. It's where the inevitable challenge of negotiating multiplicity and difference plays out on every single day, often multiple times a day if you share or use public transport often. So for researchers, this makes public transport a particularly revealing sight. What happens here tells us something important about how diversity is managed, tolerated, or rejected, especially in contemporary European societies. And now I want to move on to the bodily and embodied aspects of encounters. Now, here's a crucial point. Mobilities, movements are experienced as embodied. Travel is inherently corporeal. It involves bodies moving through a space. Of course, it's very obvious, but this is, and it's very crucial, depending on whose body is moving and how the body is read and encountered by fellow passengers, the experience and meaning of trip changes dramatically. That's why, for example, some scholars, including Tim Creswell, has conceptualized mobilities as movement plus meaning plus power. So it's not just about getting from point A to point B. The meaning of that movement, the ease or difficulty of it, the emotions it generates, all of these depending on power relation. So it's a very Foucauldian, of course, aspect towards encounter and othering. And these encounters on public transport are not merely sensorial, based on, of course, sensoriality here, I mean, based on what you see, hear, smell, or touch. They also have a lot of emotion and affect involved. And later I define what I mean by emotion and affect. They're loaded with histories, tension, anxieties, cross-cultural discomfort, and sometimes some racist intolerance. So public transport has historically been a sphere of power struggle, racial and class tension. The boundaries between us and them are established and maintained. So let's talk about Muslim other. So who is the Muslim other in contemporary Europe? Muslims are constructed in European public discourse in three overlapping ways. First, as the religio-cultural other, people whose religious demands supposedly contradict core Western liberal democratic values. Muslims are framed as problematic, as refusing modernity, secularism, or freedom of speech. The other approach towards constructing the Muslim other is as the dangerous other, predominantly linked to fundamentalism, terrorism, violence. So Muslims become suspect citizens, always already a potential threat to national security. Probably the most obvious one is, Trump's Muslim ban, especially during his first administration in the U.S., that he just banned any entry of Muslim from Muslim majority countries to U.S. Basically, no Muslim is wanted in U.S. Third one is ethno-national other. So here, people who don't belong here, for example, or who won't or can integrate into Europe or North America, are becoming the ethno-national. They're depicted as sometimes former invaders, so historical external other. So, for example, when you go through history, so the whole Muslim empire just expanding and Europe was defending itself. So the Muslim other is constructed that way, or as some sort of a very, very harsh take on Islam and Muslim as backward foreigners, unwanted immigrants, part of a sort of bad diversity, as they call it. So what is crucial here is that whole authoring happens through a homogenization process. Individual Muslims aren't encountered as individuals, but they are representative of the entire collective identity, they as an archetype. And importantly, this extends beyond Muslim to even Muslim-looking people. Arab, Christian, Sikhs, Southeast Asian, Middle Easterners, anyone who fits one way or another within this Muslim profile or Muslim prototype, through a skin tone, through clothing, through language, through culture, through religious practices. Oh, you're exotic, hence you're a Muslim, for example. And of course, the consequences that Muslims face is just harsh and dire. Muslims face psychological difficulties, loss of self-worth, self-confidence, stress, illness, loneliness, depression, even sometimes I had in literature, suicidal feelings. They face social difficulties, lower employment rates, higher rates of discrimination, limited mobility opportunities, especially for veiled women, hijabi women, and even uneven treatment in housing and job markets. But we should distinguish between different types of Islamophobia. We have systematic Islamophobia or systemic Islamophobia, the discursive and institutional dimension, and embodied Islamophobia. So anti-Muslim ideas that are lived and experienced and embodied within everyday life. So I focus on Islam, embodied Islamophobia. Sorry. So I'm not making a grand pronouncement of politicians or structural discrimination or institution. These are all, of course, matters and unfortunately exist out there. But I'm focusing on everyday lived mundane experiences of riding a bus, for example, or taking a tram, or sharing your train with other passengers. That can be tackled through ethnographic approaches. So here's my research question. I first ask, how do young Muslim as well as Muslim-looking passengers experience public transport? What is it actually like for them to ride a bus or metro or tram or train? I also ask, how is the Muslim other reproduced and negotiated within these spaces? What practices, what interaction construct and maintain Muslim otherness on the move? Third question revolves around emotion and affect that these encounters generate. What does it feel to ride a bus for a Muslim or Muslim-looking passenger? What atmospheres emerge? Fear, anxiety, happiness. What is it? The air, so feeling in the air, for example, call it atmosphere. Last but not least, What are the cultural, social, political relations activated in these mobile othering encounters? How do global, even geopolitics, translated or come down into intimate local spaces of, let's say, a boss? So by foregrounding the seemingly very mundane everyday events, catching a bus, waiting for a tram, taking a seat, that entangles Muslim with atmospheres of discomfort, fear, and anxiety, I tried to tell what it means to be Muslim in Europe and European cities today. You probably have a question in your mind: why am I focusing on predominantly on young Muslim? Well, the answer is several folds here. First, the intimate geopolitics of Islamophobia reveals, particularly around these demographic groups, young Muslim. They are growing up in a political climate where they're seen as either victim or villain, either in need for saving or causing troubles. If you're a Muslim woman, you need to be saved. If you're a Muslim man, you're causing troubles, you need to be limited, for example, in a very harsh dichotomous space. The occupation of a space, Muslim, young Muslim, I mean, the community relation, the social cohesion and integration, the sense of belonging, the identity, as both Muslim and European, are constantly problematized. And the feeling of honor and otherness is particularly strong among young Muslims, because despite often being legal citizens of the nation, born and raised in in Europe, for example, they're still seen as an outsiders. They're the generation navigating what it means to be European and Muslim simultaneously, in a context that often suggests these identities are simply incompatible. It's impossible for many people to think, okay, you're European and you're Muslim. How come? So, related predominantly to our methodology towards anthropology of Islam, I've worked on an ethnographic approach in 4 European cities: Amsterdam in Netherlands, Tallinn in Estonia, Leipzig in Germany, and Turku in Finland. I use participant observation, riding public transport myself, observing interaction, feeling the atmospheres of these spaces. Especially myself, as a brown Muslim-looking bearded person, man, you could easily feel what is happening in these public transport systems. The other method was part of the whole ethnography package is interviews. They talk to many participants, sometimes sedentary, sometimes sharing the bus with them, sometimes emails, sometimes phone. It's a wide variety of interviews based on the availability and comfort of my participants. Lengthy interviews, some small, short interviews, all based on anything that my participant would be willing to share. So that was my methodology. And then my participants, I was lucky, we came across a wide variety of participants, 74 young Muslim and Muslim-looking passengers in these 4 cities. And they were coming from 24 different countries, very diverse, very rich pool of participants. The sample was diverse across multiple ways. In terms of gender, 36 women, 38 men. In terms of age, range between 18 to 36. In terms of education, it was between high school up until Ph.D. In terms of generation, from native born and bred in Europe, to second generation, so first and second generation Muslim. In terms of socioeconomic status, again, very diverse, from working class to actually upper middle class, rich people I came across. In terms of religious involvement, also quite varied in terms of Orthodox participation or observation of Islamic faith to as very liberal, and some people call them more cultural Muslim. To some extent, some people will call them, I'm not religious, but I am. My parents are, for example. But still, I'm read as Muslim, so to speak. I'm very happy with diversity of the participant because it shows authoring doesn't depend on actual religious practice. It depends on how the body is read and how they are perceived. Now we slowly move on to my findings. I've identified 13 different modes of authoring, how young Muslims experience difference, for example, in public transport, and all of them related to the body. And I broke them down into 3 categories. Sensory authoring involve gaze, language, smell of alcohol, for example, and patterns of seating and bodily distance. Corporeal authoring includes verbal abuse, physical aggression, expression while waiting, for example, distinct patterns with elderly people, especially women, and sometimes with the staff. No service or even poor service from bus driving, for example. Last but not least, we have affective authoring. So encounters such as silence, facial expression, you grab your stuff, your belonging, for example, or the objects that people carry with themselves. So these categories are not rigid, of course, but they all overlap. And of course, impossible. For example, if you look at the, let's say, hijabi Muslim, it's gaze by intertwined. But these categorizations help us understand multiple registers through which authoring operates on spaces of public transport. So let's start off with the sensorial authoring. By sensorial authoring, I refer to the phenomenological and lived body experience of sight, hearing, smell, and touch, through which authoring can be sensed on the move. This is about the intimate, precognitive, bodily registers of being out of place. Before anyone says anything, before anything explicitly happens, Muslims and Muslim-looking passengers sense the differences through these bodily or sensorial registers. And the first one is the gaze, the look. The most repeated mentioned sensory authoring is what participants called weird looks. Salma, for example, in Tallinn says, seeing a woman of another color with a different dressing makes them look at me, and some even stare, which makes me feel uncomfortable because of the judgmental looks and silent stares. These aren't just quick glances, they are frequent, lengthy, bitter, judgmental looks that communicate unwelcomeness, disapproval, and surveillance. These looks, the bitter looks or gaze, resonates with feeling of being judged, of not being belonging, of being under scrutiny, simply for existing in this place. So it actually renders you out of place. You don't belong here. And of course, the gaze in public transport functions as a negative sanction, an attempt to discipline and regulate what are perceived as deviant behaviors or bodies. Within the confined, limited spaces of public transport, passengers mostly interact through the gaze, through the looks and movements, and policing through looking. What I mean is a racialized visual regime that marks bodies as submitted, that I also call this whole visual regime as kind of super surveillance. The gaze expects conformity. It puts constant pressure on the Muslim passengers to minimize signs of cultural difference, to assimilate through bodily comportment. And crucially, the gaze is never neutral. It's charged with judgment, feeling, affect. Later on, you will see how this affect works in our gaze. It renders some bodies inferior simply by looking at them in a particular way. The other one is hearing, auditory. Sound plays a critical and crucial role in othering process. The response of white European passengers hearing foreign, mostly brown, I call it, or non-white, non-Western languages generates conflict. For example, Pirio in Turku says, once I was saw on a bus, an acquaintance, we talked in our own language, and everything was just, casual between us. But the moment we spoke Finnish, the passengers felt good. So it was not a weird language anymore. People could understand what is happening. And these people, they look that badly at us anymore. This is fascinating. The same people, the same conversation, but when the language switched from Arabic to Finnish, the atmosphere changed, the looks softened. So alongside the panoptical white othering gaze, listening to what is said becomes another method of surveillance towards racially marked bodies. Language becomes a proxy for belonging or not belonging. Another interesting thing that I came across is just also smell, olfactory, especially alcohol. A smell is another sensorial mode of othering. Many participants, particularly women, mention the discomfort around the smell, especially alcohol on public transport. Sarah, for example, says, I hate the smell of beer and always end up with people sitting next to me on a train drinking beer. Now, olfactory experience both about the activity of the individual who expels the smell and the social meaning of the smell. The smell is a social cultural construct with the potential to produce this difference and discomfort. For Muslim passengers, many of whom they don't drink alcohol, of course, for religious purposes, the smell marks a cultural boundary. But it's more than cultural preference. It's intimately entangled with the experience of smell and safety. Let me explain what do I mean by safety. So why does alcohol matter so much? Because for participants, both men and women, alcohol is related to drunk people, and drunk people can escalate sexual harassment, racist comment, even physical aggression. For example, Amal in Tallinn says, there are many drunk people, so that can happen a lot. I don't know what they say or mumbling. You don't really understand what they're saying. They're drunk, they mumble a lot. But once I think there was a guy saying something like Allah Akbar. So we're just imitating that, hey, this Muslim can be violent and hold dangerous other discourse the drunk person was constructing. So for the Muslim passengers, public transport becomes the main place of encountering drunk people. We generate both physical and social discomfort and potential harassment. This leads to strategic behaviors, selecting certain public space over others, avoiding certain routes, certain times, certain destination. So the mobility actually pattern shaped by geography of these consumption. And the whole smell. It's fascinating how people just wait for hours or even change the path because through the network of friends or family notice that, hey, if I take this path, especially at this time, I may come across these people and I prefer not to, so I change my way. The other one is touch, the haptic aspect of sensory othering. So the haptic encounter, so encounter through touch and bodily proximity, involves the whole body moving through spaces of public transport. Bodily distance was repeatedly mentioned, and I also encountered myself and I observed many times. For example, Iqbal in Leipzig says, for people, for example, some young women, a young woman sat next to me, and the next stop, she changed her seat. Now, sitting alone on a busy vehicle could be, as a sign of civil inattention, as Goffman, for example, talks about it, a polite ignoring of others that makes actually urban life polite and possible. That is fine. But I would say this, the whole shunning, this whole haptic othering goes much, much beyond this politeness. The haptic space, the distance between passengers and Muslim passengers, the bubble around the bodies and others tend to be much broader than European counterparts. So sitting alone on a busy vehicle, or passengers change the seat, or passengers refusing to let them sit next to them, or asking them to go somewhere, sit somewhere else, or stand even. All of these examples of haptic othering, physical avoidance, social sanctioned, enacted upon these passengers. So the whole assortments of sensorial authoring was what I came across with. So gaze and hearing, smell, and of course touch. The other aspect is corporeal authoring as representational social spatial practices of exclusion. Those lived moments that are tangible to the body, they are cognitive. You understand what is happening. They aren't just sensed or felt, they are explicit, visible, sometimes even violent. This is where the threshold of tolerance gets crossed very severely, where implicit bias becomes explicit discrimination, where discomfort becomes confrontation. And let's go through these several ways of modes of corporeal authoring. The most repeated one also came across it is just verbal abuse. Sometimes people say just like Jesus is going to burn you in hell, crappy foreigners, go back to your country, or Muslims are terrorists, are all examples of verbal othering. These sentences reproduces multiple forms of othering simultaneously. So the religious other through reference to Jesus and hell. The ethno-national other here goes, for example, goes to your country. The dangerous other, the whole accusation of terrorism. These are what I call moments of banal terrorism. Nationalists claim that solidify the nation by framing certain groups of people as international terror regime threatening the Western liberal ideas. Charged with fear of the other, these corporeal encounters connect the global to the local. So the whole geopolitical conflict and global fears of terrorism and the whole discourse around actually transcend, materialize into everyday travel spaces, and some Muslim would actually experience that through these encounters. Sometimes the threshold of tolerance even crossed further and often actually practiced in a very harsh physical aggression. So physical aggression is directly, mostly towards women. Makes sense because hijabi women are easily identifiable, and these women are perceived as easy victim of hate. For example, Tara, a convert in Leipzig, says, because of my headscarf, I've insulted and even spat on. So people spit on her several times, which is, yeah, it's quite discomforting. Or Riaz in Tallinn says, My friend's wife wears the headscarf, and once someone shouted at her and wanted to punch her and take her hijab off or something like that. So othering is not just attitude or dislike or fear of foreigners. It's actually an activity, sometimes violent practice that causes bodily harm and damage. Bodies are literally at risk. The other one is actually waiting. So I call it abject othering. Is not limited to on public transport, literally, but also some participants indicated that the most problematic experience occurred when they're waiting for the bus at the bus stop or tram stop or train platform. For example, Mona in Thailand says, I know a Russian Estonian lady was wearing a black abaya and a face cover, so niqab. She was going with other sisters who were not wearing the hijab. They were waiting at the bus stop, and the guy literally punched her in the face. So bus or tram stops put Muslim in direct contact with other passengers, not only within the public transport, but also passers-by. So people walking on the alongside the streets. So they become highly visible and therefore quite vulnerable. So waiting means your movement is paused, slowed down, and your stationary visible situation makes you hyper vigilant, hyper aware of the situation. So you know if people come towards you for certain intention. So the anxieties around waiting are profound. For example, Noor in Amsterdam saying, when I'm on a train platform, I always take 2 or 3 steps backwards, and I won't sit right before the line, the train line, because you never know what may happen, and there are some crazy people out there. The reason I do is because of the stories you had, and she was referring to an instance in England that actually someone pushed a hijabi woman on the train, and the train crossed, and the horrible thing happened. Sorry. Oh, back. So think about this in this way. She strategically positioned her body based on the fear of being pushed onto the train track because she is a hijabi, veiled, visible Muslim woman. These anxieties and fears around public transport station don't just limit mobility, they teach Muslim-looking people how to perceive and engage with public spaces. Based on spatial imaginaries of Islamophobia, they move through spaces with the knowledge that the racialized body is associated with risk and insecurity. This challenges the sense of national belonging, cultural citizenship, sense of belonging in public space, and access to and movement through the cities. Another corporeal othering was actually interestingly from elderly women, European elderly women. It's a very interesting and counterintuitive finding I came across. Some participants said that the visual, verbal, or this external, this physical othering come from elderly women and other elderly women passengers. For example, Amina says that the interesting thing is that the thing that have happened to me, like someone shows aggression, is almost always comes from these women. The literature came across very quite ambiguous about gender and othering. Some studies suggest that women are less open to immigrants or immigration. Others find no gender differences between the othering, and some found this women actually quite more tolerant to it. Also, so literature and studies is quite mixed. What I could think, and my interpretation from these stories is that based on Orientalist portrayal of Islam as a misogynistic religion that many women with European women would think about it. The discourse might trigger hostile speech and practice from European women, particularly those with lower investment in the human capital, as sociologists would call. So people with less education, less cosmopolitan exposure to other people. They may perceive Muslim women as threatening gender equality and a symbol of female oppression, and just actually triggers them or rubs them in the wrong way. So they may say something or do something unpleasant. Another thing is also from elderly women is, for example, that, for example, here a story of Irfan talks about, I can say that the most unfriendly encounter in public transport or beyond comes from elderly people. So this whole unpleasant looks, verbal abuse, or physical violence from senior passengers are often wrapped up in heavier narratives about nationalism, the welfare state, the vague, nostalgic sense of good old days where our country was still ours. So the whole elderly passengers are coming from the age of more ethnically homogeneous European cities. So their formative experiences were nations that defined themselves as Christian, white, culturally unified. But again, the multiculturalism happens, and it asks them a fundamentally different way of approach to a sense of national identity and belonging. So Muslim-looking person actually challenge the old-fashioned way of nationalism because they ask, hey, multiculturalism is happening, demography has changed, and therefore the sense of nationalism and patriotism might be not applicable anymore. And some elderly people cannot cope with that, and then they may something that's not very positive and polite. The other thing that goes beyond a passenger is actually, the encounters within public transport staff. Sarah says, the driver saw me at the bus station. He looked right at me, and he was like, nope, I'm not stopping for you. I ended up being late at work. Or another example, Yasmin, a hijabi woman in Tallinn. I remember during the first months of commuting to a nearby town where I was working, the train staff were suspicious and not talking very nicely to me, or checking my tickets in a not polite way. So these poor or no service provisions are experience of racial or religious profiling by transport staff, the form of discrimination and the excess of institutional power. When people who represent the system, who wear uniform, who have authority engage othering, it sends a powerful message about who belongs and who does not. And last but not least, we have the affective othering, which means the micro, subtle, non-representational experience, those short-lived feelings rather than permanent states that cause tension. These are the hardest. It's really hard to articulate, but actually quite prevalent and pervasive. They are atmospheric, ambient. They shape the feeling of being on public transport, being and experiencing the other. Imagine you yourself, probably you enter a room and you read the atmosphere. Something is there, something is not right, something is not positive, or you feel something is on the air. This is exactly what we mean by affective othering and affective atmospheres. One powerful affective othering moment is silence. Salma says, most of my experience on trams or buses have been like, I'm entering the tram and generally there is a silence in public transport. You could say that public transport is often quiet, true, but this is a different kind of silence. A silence that descends when she enters, when she goes to the public transport. Silence that feels reactive, charged. The silence is meaningful. And we can theorize actually a silence in several ways. So Brian Masumi, he talks about that silence is a microshock driven by the perceived deviant embodiment of Muslim passengers that circulates through and populates the vehicle upon their entrance. Or Sarah Ahmed calls silence as some sort of atmospheric walls, the way to claim a space and as available to someone more than others. So silence becomes a technique and a way of preventing someone from staying. So you just go, you don't belong here. Or, for example, Cheryl Glean talks about silence as substantive and meaningful rhetoric that can be employed intentionally as a tool to protect authority and as a means of punishment, retribution, and rejection. All of this means that silence can be actually quite violent. And now, if you remember from gaze, I said it's affective. Now we can explore a little bit more here. Facial expressions are thick with affect. Some participants mentioned feeling of negativity circling in the air, manifested in faces, angry, bitter, judgmental looks. Samina, for example, in Leipzig says, sometimes I look, people act like that angry facial expression. On trams, for example, I'm walking by and one woman is looking at me like that. It's a very angry face. I think that that woman, she doesn't want foreigners, or maybe she doesn't like foreigners. She doesn't understand what is happening. The fact is that the most important size, the face is the most important size or medium through which affect and affective judgment can be processed and communicated. It expresses themselves through disgust, disdain, repulsion, and latent anxiety, a sense of distress hidden in the background, the whole othering that actually reaches as if water is boiling and reaches in tipping point and surfaces through the face, as if metaphorically the water is slowly boiling and is boiled, that just it can explode. The repulsion happens. So you can see racism in someone's face before they say even one single word. The other thing is just affects are action potential. They do something. They have the capacity to change the field of feeling and cause people to do something. So here actually the biological component affect plays a very important role. Hassan in Leipzig says, I really don't accept, for example, that old women or young people, when I enter, how can I say, they grab their bags as if I'm a thief. I don't really like that. So again, here wrong bodies with traces of dubious origin that don't fit and sink into a spaces of public transport stands out as a stranger danger. As Hassan talks about, grabbing belonging is part of what I call technology of racism in contemporary European cities that renders a Muslim-looking even passenger, especially male passenger, as a stereotypical criminal, veiled, dangerous other. Before he does anything, his body actually says, hey, he can cause trouble, grab your bag in case he's going to steal it, you'll be safe. The other thing is very important that within atmosphere of surveillance, suspicion, and mistrust, not only the body of a Muslim-looking or Muslim man, but also the objects that person carries also cause anxiety. Ahmed, for example, in Amsterdam says, sometimes when I'm at a train station and I have a little longer beard and leave my bag to a friend or I go to the toilet, people look at me, oh no. He jokingly says that people are afraid of, hey, I have a bomb or something in my bag and it's going to explode and something going to happen. The whole terrorist, dangerous Muslim order is just is reconstructed. So a backpack cited by or carried by here, for example, Ahmed, is charged with affect, becomes what I call affective artifact, and has the capacity to change the affective atmosphere qualities of public transport. It shows that a brown body of a male Muslim is never far removed from an image of a terrorist. It's a fantasy of a whiteness that the threatening other is almost always potentially a terrorist. So now I would like to wrap this presentation and just conclude what I have done, and hopefully we have a very vibrant Q&A. So I've tried to bring attention to the biological and sensory aspect of everyday social life on the move, how othering is sensed through bodies before it actually consciously processed. I've highlighted the importance of religion in corporeal dimensions of being a passenger, how religious identity gets inscribed on bodies and read by other people. I've explored the affective component of othering encounters, those subtle atmospheric feelings that shape experience. And crucially, I focus on what the body does instead of what the body is. It's not about the essential characteristics of Muslim bodies, but about that how those bodies are read, interpreted, and responded to in a situated encounter. Within the multicultural encounters and intersection of corporeality, sensoriality, spatio-temporality, and materiality of everyday urban spaces, here public transport, the Muslim order actually reconstructed and renegotiated. So the whole Muslim order, dangerous order, ethno-national order, religio-cultural order actually constantly negotiated and reconstructed. These micro behaviors and microaggressions, these micro social geographies and tensions associated with public transport experience of young Muslims are not isolated examples. They are examples of how othering is systematically lived and enacted in contemporary European cities. So these snapshots from bus or trams help us understand that anti-Muslim racism is not constrained in particular neighborhood or communities. It's not just about where Muslims live or work. It's enacted in the everyday spaces of interaction, in actually everyday infrastructure of our everyday urban life. Public transport is as a democratic space that can principally open to everyone. Actually, an example of how othering actually constantly practiced and experienced. And I hope that my approach to the whole othering could be interesting for you, for your project, because it shows the possibility that we can study religion in a very different ways, from the sense, from the corporeality, from the affective, the so subtle aspect, and also in public space, in private space, in a wide variety of ways through which you can approach religion. Thank you very much. And I'm open to your Q&A, hopefully.
All right, thank you very much, Reza. This is a very interesting presentation. I just want to confirm, is this work is the one that published in the Sociological Forum?
yeah, this is a synthesis of what we've done, but it builds upon my series of other work. So those sensorio corporeal affective agency, I worked on separately, and then with some other colleagues, we just condensed it into that paper. And of course, my book extensively talks about different ways of experience of being the other, hence encountering the other.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I never know that the experience in maybe bus or tram could be very meaningful data for Muslim group. All right, let me allow me to explain a bit about what you have presented in Indonesian language, and then after that the audience can give you some question. Jadi Bapak Ibu, penelitian yang barusan dipresentasikan oleh Reza adalah tentang bagaimana Muslim muda, penumpang Muslim pemuda yang masih muda di dalam perjalanan sehari-hari itu mengalami apa yang disebut dengan othering atau menjadi orang yang lain atau menjadi orang yang tidak menjadi bagian di komunitas tersebut. Penelitian ini dilakukan di 4 negara, di Amsterdam, Tallinn, Leipzig, dan Turku, dan melibatkan 74 partisipan dari berbagai latar belakang negara, termasuk di dalamnya ada Indonesia. Sedikit yang saya bisa tangkap dari temuan beliau, salah satunya adalah tentang sensorial othering, yaitu pengalaman menjadi Muslim di mana pengalaman itu didapat melalui respon-respon seperti tatapan, suara atau gerakan tubuh dari penumpang yang lain. Jadi misalnya ada penumpang lain yang menatap atau melihat Muslim yang membawa tas seolah-olah itu menjadi berbahaya, seperti itu. Kemudian ada corporeal othering atau interaksi tubuh orang lain, di mana misalnya penumpang lain itu memberikan jarak atau merasa tidak nyaman dengan penumpang Muslim. Jadi misalnya Muslim masuk, kemudian penumpang lain agak minggir begitu. Kemudian affective othering ini berkaitan dengan emosional atau perasaan. Jadi misalnya ketika di dalam bus suasana tiba-tiba berubah atau tegang ketika ada seorang Muslim yang masuk, atau ada penumpang lain yang tampak gelisah. Dan itu juga dirasakan sendiri oleh si Muslim sendiri karena harus menenangkan orang lain dengan gerak tubuh atau misalnya tersenyum. Jadi kalau penumpang lain masuk saja, kalau Muslim masuk seolah-olah jadi wajib menenangkan penumpang lain bahwa everything is fine, bahwa semuanya tidak terjadi apa-apa. Baik Bapak Ibu, Prof. Zuhairi, Prof. Dedi Irwansyah, dan Bapak Ibu semua, kita ke sesi tanya jawab. Silahkan diperkenalkan nama dan dari mana atau dari prodi apa boleh, silahkan. So we are giving a chance for the audience to give some comments or some questions. Silahkan Bapak Ibu. Halo.
Yeah, I can hear. I'm waiting for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I can start with one question. I'm actually not not the researcher in this field, but very interested as I listen to your presentation. Halo.
Halo, Mr.
Oh, okay.
Ya, saya mau bertanya. Saya pakai bahasa Indonesia ya.
Yeah, we have one audience.
Nanti tolong di-translate ya.
Siap, bro.
Oke, saya jadi agak gimana gitu mendengar cerita Pak Masker tadi. Sebenarnya apa yang kemudian melatar belakangi adanya ketakutan di Eropa terhadap Muslim? Apakah itu natural atau by design?
Terima kasih. Very good question from Hasanuddin Muhammad from I think the Sharia department. Reza, you.
Yes, I'm looking. Yes, please.
Okay. The question is regarding the response, the encounter that experienced by Muslim in Europe. Are the encounters, for example, the feeling threat or feeling uncomfortable when they are in the same bus with Muslim, are those encounter from non-Muslim actually natural or maybe by design or institutionally designed or something like that?
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, I had an example from a participant in Amsterdam. So he's living in Amsterdam. His brother lives in Utrecht, a neighboring city.
Mm-hmm.
And so he lives in a Muslim majority neighborhood in Amsterdam. He takes tram from his place, go to Amsterdam Central Station to take train to Utrecht.
Yeah.
And then from Utrecht take another tram to go to his brother's, who also lives in Muslim majority neighborhood. And interestingly, so he was showing me this diagram, sort of in mental map. So in my neighborhood, when I enter the tram, I see many other Muslims, and it's okay. So the tram is okay, and then slowly the tram goes to Central Station, passes through the fancy areas and the whole city center, and then slowly Muslim gets less and less and less. I feel more uncomfortable. It's fascinating, and then I have to just get out of the tram and then take the train. And also the train is just a place that you see so many people, not only Dutch people, but also international people. And I feel so many weird-looking people, people looking at me, and also the ticket person asked several times, your ticket. And also he has several examples of people don't sit next to me, or people sit next to me, but again, the body language is so weird. And interestingly, so all this stuff happens till he gets, for example, goes to Utrecht, and then the same thing happens from Utrecht Central Station to his to brother's neighborhood. Actually, so less brown people, Muslim people living around, slowly going down, more Muslim, and things get more comfortable. So basically, to answer to Hasanuddin Muhammad, basically, that's the reason, for example, Muslim prefer to stay within their own neighborhood. This is some sort of comfort they experience there. So basically, I have all my shops and food and everything there. I have my own community there. I don't feel negative experiences. It's there. But exactly, this is the geography of othering or Islamophobia that push them into certain geographic boundaries. So these have a mental map of the city. Okay, I'm safe here. This neighborhood, I'm also safe there. But then the way I get to that, if I bike, for example, that cause happen, that problem can happen. If I take a tram, that can happen, but at certain time is less. So also network of news. Okay, you hear from neighbors or families or friends, I experienced this in line of tram at this time. So if you want to get there, maybe you want to avoid that line at that time, for example. Or if you want to take ride a bike to that neighborhood, maybe take that path. It might be a little bit longer, but at least it's well lit. It also has goes through neighborhood the longer way, so you feel safer. In terms of being natural thing, well, biologically speaking, humans, we tend to differentiate from others. This is part of the life. I mean, I'm brown, you are brown, the other person is white, the other, so on and so forth. This is part of the whole differentiation. This is biological aspect. But the way we respond to this biology, this is something else. This is cultural. This is learned. And even the affective part of it. So, for example, you see someone, you grab your bag, you grab your phone, as it is the other person going to steal it. It is also learned. You constantly exposed to news, to other stories, your own previous experiences, that it becomes cognitive. So the way you label it, the way you channel that biological differentiation, that's why it becomes othering. That's why you making label it as a negative thing, for example. That's why, for example, this person was saying here, I entered the room, the boss, and it's suddenly silent. I entered the room and this woman grabbed the bag, for example. I leave my bag to go to the toilet and people, oh shit, he's going to just, sorry my language, oh, he's going to just explode and you're going to just die, for example. The whole thing is, for example, part of this negativity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the negative responses from the non-Muslim can be said like the response are learned or maybe influenced by what they see, what they watch in the media.
Yeah,
like that.
Definitely media has an agenda, definitely. But also has, again, human capital. So if you're highly educated, if you're already exposed to other different people, if you have a meaningful, I call it, encounter, you, for example, hey, some people come to you, hey, why you have, for example, I don't know, especially women, why do you wear this? Or why don't you eat something during Ramadan? Or what can you eat? Can you, for example, I don't know, just smoke cigarette? Or, for example, can you, yeah, so many questions. You see that comes from curiosity. So the other person is interested. So you stop and you have a conversation, then you learn from each other. This is great. This whole meaningful, positive encounter hopefully elevates the whole negative, limits the negative aspects of othering or Islamophobia. But then not everyone is willing. And that's why, for example, the political climate is changing.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is about migration, the whole idea of, again, whole these three aspects of othering. So dangerous other, extremism is always part of the game. So the Muslim are terrorists, the Muslim ethno-religious other. So these people are not us, and the whole, what is it? They are not nationalists. They have dubious, affiliation. For example, yeah, you are Dutch, but you're not completely Dutch because you're Muslim. And then, for example, if your religious leader says something, you're going to, for example, support them instead of us. This is what happens. Yeah, it's very complicated. So,
yeah, that's a kind of complex. Okay, Hasan, so gimana? Ketangkap ya? Jadi kurang lebih ini natural atau by design itu ada intersection yang kompleks di dalamnya. Jadi misalnya tadi Reza kasih contoh Muslim tinggal di Utrecht, tetangganya Amsterdam, kemudian dia hidupnya di neighboring kompleks Muslim. Jadi waktu keluar ya merasa aman-aman saja, pakai pakaian Muslim, kemudian ada yang pakai hijab gitu. Kemudian di perjalanan semakin ke daerah-daerah yang Muslimnya sedikit itu ya otomatis perasaannya muncul sendiri. Yang tadinya comfort jadi nggak comfort begitu. Jadi muncul begitu sendiri. Kemudian di stasiunnya tiketman-nya, misalnya orang yang melayani tiketing itu bisa bertanya-tanya lebih banyak ke Muslim daripada ke yang lain. Jadi kejadian-kejadian atau respon-respon tadi Kak Reza menyebutkan kalau menjadi berbeda itu secara biologis sudah jadi sifatnya manusia, tapi merespon perbedaan itu adalah sesuatu yang apa namanya ya, yang dinurtur, yang dipelajari, yang kemudian itu yang dialami kemudian mempengaruhi daya pikir dan juga sikap kita. Jadi tadi kasih contoh lagi misalnya semakin highly educated, semakin terdidik, kemungkinan untuk othering, untuk menganggap orang itu sebagai orang lain, bukan bagian dari kita, itu semakin kecil. Jadi education, pendidikan punya dampak yang positif untuk mengurangi fenomena yang negatif tersebut. Kurang lebih seperti itu. Mohon maaf kalau tidak lengkap. Bapak Ibu yang mendengar, siapa saja boleh menambahkan. Okay, I think we can go to the next question. We still have 20 minutes.
Iya Pak, tanya.
Silakan Ibu Nurul. Oh, Nurul Mahmuda. Oh. Baik. Langsung bahasa Inggris kalau ini. Silakan.
Pakai bahasa Indonesia aja Pak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam hormat untuk seluruh keluarga IAIN. Win JUSILA ya, Masya Allah. Di sini masih IAIN, padahal dari saya lahir sampai sekarang masih IAIN. Tapi alhamdulillah Metro luar biasa, ada banyak dosen-dosennya, khususnya rektor sebelumnya juga, Bu Siti Nurjana dan kawan-kawan, dan Ibu Prof. Ida juga. Langsung saja ya Pak Mazkur, selamat Pak atas Ph.D-nya. Saya sering WA-an dengan istri. Langsung saya ingin menanyakan Pak, memang kalau saya pernah bolang ya di India, memang sangat tidak ramah untuk Muslim, karena saya punya pengalaman dideportasi dari India langsung ke Malaysia, tapi balik lagi ke India lagi, mentalnya dikuatin di sana. Nah, mau pulang pun seperti itu. Hampir tidak bisa pulang karena wajah visa saya dengan wajah aslinya berbeda. Nah, itulah memang saya rasa memang di daerah bukan Indonesia saya sudah tidak ramah ya, apalagi daerah-daerah yang non-Muslim. Nah, yang pertanyaan saya ini hanya menambahkan, dan pertanyaan yang lebih detail sebenarnya, kalau di daerah non-Muslim yang seperti Hindu begitu kan, mereka punya istri banyak, sudah biasa. Nah, yang saya ingin tanyakan, apakah di wilayah Eropa itu khususnya Muslim mungkin sudah menganalisa tentang Muslim, apakah ada yang punya istri 2 atau 3 Pak, seperti di Indonesia?
Oke,
Baik, terima kasih Pak Maskur.
Siap, terima kasih. Reza, hello.
Yes, I can hear. Please.
This is a bit something else. Nurma, she experienced the othering herself while she traveled to India. Got a bad experience being deported from India, but then she managed to come back. She saw the experience of looking to the Hindu community there, and this is the question is about, while the Hindu community have more than one wife, many wives, and then also some Muslim Indonesian do that here. She's wondering whether Muslim in Europe also, are there any Muslim more than one in Europe?
Okay, polygamy, yeah. Well, as far as I know, that's the thing. Stuff happens, but then the legality happens. So if any marriage happens, you need to register it within municipality and national level. So a municipality linked to the national data set. So I married this woman, and again, she's my wife, her husband, so is there. But then again, by law, of course, polygamy is just prohibited. So you cannot do that. Okay? But then in terms of Sharia, of course, you can have another woman as your wife. That is possible. But then if the divorce happens, if the woman goes to municipality and asks for the welfare, nothing gets to her, simply because, hey, you are not a married woman to that man. You don't have any legal trace of the marriage. And then there is also, as far as I know, there could be some punishment for the man to have two wives because it's simply not allowed legally.
Yeah.
Polygamy is not allowed. So again, even that happens. On paper, you are not married. Sharia, yes. Religiously, yes. But again, here is this thing. Here, because of secularism, legality or the paperwork, so to speak, has the saying, even if you are religious and you go to church and marry, but then you also have the paperwork already done. You are legally married, not also religious. But the second wife, you cannot do that. If you do religiously, if the divorce happens later, there is you have nothing to simply claim for your thing, unless it's against whole community thing. Okay, the community of Muslim, just for being part of the community, okay, the marriage happened, the divorce happened, and then you have some obligations, so on. So, but I personally, I come across this. I am aware of the anecdotes you hear from there. So the divorce happens, the marriage happens, and officials know that, but then because there's no paperwork, no one can do anything.
All right, thank you. So basically by law is prohibited, ya. Ya. So Mbak Nurma, jadi sepertinya lebih aman tinggal di Europe. Tidak akan tiba-tiba ditinggal nikah siri, Mbak Nurma. Karena Mbak Nurma, are you with me? Masih di sini?
Yes.
Artinya kalau dari kita nih, karena hukumnya di sana itu melarang poligami. Terus nanti secara hukum di sana, secara hukum syariah mungkin muslimah menikah lebih dari satu, ada yang begitu. Tapi nanti kalau divorce, nggak bisa dapat gono gini karena tidak ada tidak ada dokumen begitu. Yang terdokumen adalah satu istri, kurang lebih begitu. Oke.
Terima kasih.
Okay. Alright, thank you. Oke, guys, Bapak Ibu, ada lagi pertanyaan?
Di chat kayaknya ada, Pak.
Okay, so Reza, there is I think a chat that telling us experience. I would like to read it. I would like to share from Halia, from Ibu Halia. I would like to share an experience I had at the end of 2014 in Germany. In fact, the people there were very friendly. At that time, I was planning to visit an Indonesian student studying in Hanover. So I traveled by bus from Frankfurt to Hanover on my own. Though the bus was full of passengers. Alhamdulillah, everyone was kind and helpful, even though they were German citizens who are predominantly non-Muslim. Any comment for this, Reza?
I'm not saying any encounter in a bus or public transport or any situation even out there is negative. So luckily nothing happened, and this is great, and it happens so many times that nothing happens.
Yes.
But then what I highlighted here, there are some instances that the stuff happens.
Yes.
And considering that you have many people, I mean, Muslim and Muslim looking, that live in here, and it doesn't matter, it's all Europe, then the experience happens. And the whole idea around the justice and the just city is to make living situation or experience of people less negative and increase the quality of life. If that incident happens, it taps into underlying. So why the other person is shouting at the other person? Why am I not comfortable sitting around or being around the other person? Then this is something else. But again, alhamdulillah, nothing happened in this situation, and I'm very happy. And does not mean that if I go out and take a bus or ride my bike to another, do some groceries, anything happens. No, but the whole thing is, stuff happens, and that's why we're trying to make it less and explain why stuff happens. But the frequency is not that high, or person to person. And for example, for my participant was saying, sometimes nothing happened, and sometimes stuff happens a lot. But for example, if a terrorist stuff happens, or for example, if some, let's say, I don't know, honor killing happens, or for example, some accident happens, for example, in a football match between two countries, and then some people go out and do some stuff, and then a couple of days I'm gonna have some negative encounter, and then it fades away.
Oh, yes, I think so. I think the finding of your research is also good for us to be aware that even though the frequency is not that high, it's good for us to be cautious, to be more careful when traveling somewhere. My own experience during my study in Australia, in Melbourne, I didn't experience that kind of negative encounter, but I did. I mean, there are some news that some videos happen in Australia that there was a Pakistani university student, Muslim, on the bus. Her hijab was pulled off from her head. It did happen, something like that, even though not that a frequent.
But also, I mean, the whole othering happens within the Muslim majority countries. It's not also related to Western European countries. Even, for example, Pakistan, in Iran, in Muslim majority countries, Gulf countries, for example, imagine just, I don't know, a person with a very tight hijab, especially for women, works in a kind of a upper middle class neighborhood in a country, in a Muslim majority country. She is going to get some looks. Again, is this also part of it? And also, if a bearded guy walking around this neighborhood, he also gonna encounter some experiences. Again, it doesn't mean that it's confined to certain situation. But basically, when it's also very geographical. So if the neighborhood, if the situation by socioeconomic situation is a little bit different, and then an outsider enters, then probably by nature we look what is happening here. But again, if the look is read by me, imagine in a negative way, then it is othering, for example. Or there's also a tricky part with affect, because you do not know about the intention. You might experience that look as a negative thing, but also it comes from me. I'm genuinely experiencing curiosity. And you, as a subject of look, you read it as, oh, negative. I've people looking at me in a bitter way. But I'm basically curious what is happening here. So it's a very tight hijabi woman, or this man with a beard, or, for example, kippah on his head. I usually do not see these kind of people in this neighborhood, even if I am living in a Muslim majority country. In my neighborhood, does not happen often, and I look and okay, what is happening is curiosity, and the other person can take it in a negative. This is the tricky part, because you do not know the intention. But then that's the thing. If the becomes sensorial or corporeal, so it goes beyond the precognitive into tangible aspect of it, then the intention is clear. If I, for example, go and talk to this hijabi woman, hey, what you doing here? What's work here, and say something negative, then yes, it's a downward Islamophobic act, even with Muslim majority countries.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Thank you, Ibu Dahlia, for sharing the experience. Profesor Dahlia, mohon maaf, Profesor Dahlia dari IAIN Pontianak. Betul sekali, Ibu, dan Reza senang sekali mendapat sharing tersebut karena tidak ada pengalaman yang tidak mengenakan. Dan seperti yang Reza sampaikan, riset ini bukan berarti terus menyampaikan bahwa kalau Muslim keluar kemudian naik bus, nanti akan ada hal-hal negatif yang pasti terjadi. Frekuensinya menurut Reza itu tidak terlalu tinggi. Kemudian riset ini menunjukkan tidak terlalu tinggi, tetapi memang masih ada. Pengalaman saya pribadi di Melbourne juga begitu. Selama kurang lebih 4 tahun di sana jarang sekali terjadi. Namun ada sebuah pengalaman di mana mahasiswi Pakistan dari Monash University mendapat perlakuan yang kurang baik di bus, ditarik hijabnya. Biasanya sama anak-anak muda yang ya anak-anak nakal begitu, Bapak Ibu. Masih terjadi meskipun memang jarang begitu. Oke. Bapak Ibu, Prof. Suhairi, masih punya waktu? Masih ada ini? Apa kita closing? Atau mungkin satu pertanyaan terakhir, Bapak Ibu? One last question before 5 p.m.
Taufik.
Ustadz Taufik, silakan. Ustadz.
Oke, terima kasih. Thanks for the sharing, Mr. Reza. Tapi saya akan melanjutkan pertanyaan saya dengan bahasa Indonesia.
Ya.
Pertanyaan singkatnya, apakah ada seperti gini, dalam kajian antropologi Islam dalam konteks Indonesia, biasanya ada proses islamisasi budaya lokal gitu, hingga menciptakan bentuk-bentuk Islam yang khas dengan daerah gitu. Nah, apakah itu juga terjadi? Saya nggak tahu, Burmatkur, apakah Mr. Reza ini asli dari Belanda atau beliau?
Sepertinya saya belum tahu latar belakang.
Oke, apakah mungkin beliau pernah riset tentang proses islamisasi di tempat yang pernah beliau teliti mungkin gitu, yang terjadi melalui interaksi budaya lokal yang sudah ada, kemudian menciptakan bentuk-bentuk Islam yang khas di berbagai daerah dalam Indonesia, misalnya kayak praktik ziarah ya, yang dulu sebagai ziarah kubur gitu kan, mungkin banyak sekali unsur-unsur mistisnya, tapi dengan adanya Islamisasi, kemudian ziarah kubur itu dimaknai bukan mitos gitu, bukan suatu yang tahu, tapi sebagai bentuk ya untuk meningkatkan spiritual seperti itu. Nah, saya penasaran apakah di daerah ya Amsterdam mungkin Belanda atau mungkin riset-riset beliau ada Islamisasi itu, karena salah satu kajian dalam antropologi Islam Indonesia seperti itu kan, dikaji tentang Islamisasi budaya lokalnya gitu. Mungkin itu saja, Mister.
Baik, terima kasih. Thank you, Ustadz Taufik. Reza, so Taufik is asking about the context is in Indonesia, the anthropological study of Islam. One of them is the Islamization of local culture, like for example the ziarah kubur, the grave visit. How to say that in English? Grave pilgrimage or something like that.
Yeah, I understand ziarah. Yeah.
Yeah, ziarah in the past is mostly maybe contain some activities, shirk activities, for example. Then the Muslim come and then kind of make some modification and then put and insert or integrate with the Islamic values, like reading Holy Quran or some salawat or something like, and then pray for the dead bodies there. So in European context, is that kind of Islamization of existing local culture happen? That's the question.
Yeah. Well, Islamization has, in this case that you define, I think, comes from established institutions and governance, I would say. So the government or the local community or the local governance tries to embed the local culture within broader Islamic tradition, so to speak, and hence some trade-offs. So some religious observation goes into local culture, and local culture is transformed into religious way. And these are, yes, of course, for your ziyarah or some other aspect of this is part of the case, of course, salawat, for example. But in European context, this is not Muslim majority. Hence, a huge clash, resistance from bigger community that the whole idea of institutional or systemic Islamophobia around this, that hey, we do not allow Muslim to take over our culture. That's the whole idea of, for example, Trump's Muslim ban, that the fear of that the Muslim become the majority and impose their own ideas on us. But again, it's a local situation, a very private sphere. Of course, you can do anything. Even in Muslim majority neighborhoods within Europe, in Amsterdam, somewhere, you can have, for example, again, it's a mosque as a community, and groups of people go there and do the observances. It's part of any religious organization, doesn't matter, even depends on Muslim majority or Muslim minority countries. It happens. This is indeed has been happening everywhere. But again, if I am understanding correctly, the Islamization that comes is a top-down approach to a transforming local context and embedding it within broader Islamic observances. It has, again, a bigger picture from the top down. And hence here, I do not think, I have no experience with that. There, for example, let's say, the building of mosque is an Islamization, for example. This huge, for example, resistance around the call for prayer, right? Azan, for example. There's also a lot of resistance around it, because we have, again, the whole idea of the discourse around the Muslim other. This is a cultural, religious other. This is ethno-national. We have our own tradition, which is church and Christianity. And we have on Sundays, simply we ring the bell, and that's the way we just promote our own religious observances. But then if a Muslim community wants to build a mosque, then there's lots of debates around. And if you want to have 5 times call for prayer in the morning, and yeah, these are the moments that friction happens. So even in Muslim majority neighborhoods, you do not have that. You have, of course, your mosque, of course. Again, the whole mosque with different architecture, with different size, stuff happen. From a little tiny room to a very massive, majestic mosque happens. It's part of the the landscape of the city. But then, if this transforms to a bigger social aspect of life, then there are some hesitation, some resistance, I would say, even, because here religion stays private in a domestic or in a private or in a certain places. Religion goes to church, goes to synagogue, goes to mosque, and of course in your house you can do anything as long as you don't just upset other people, right? But then if you're, for example, your mosque, it's just, again, the whole idea is you just disrupts the urban silhouette of the city, right? Suddenly you have 2 minarets here, and then it's different from the traditional church, for example. That's why, for example, so many, especially during the secularization or the drawback of religion from public sphere, so many actually mosques here actually are former churches. So basically, church turned into a mosque, and again a little bit of interior repurposing, and now you have a mosque, which is okay, because again, The landscape is old European landscape. The architecture is old way. Basically, it has been repurposed. But then, if you have a new, again, let's say Ottoman mosque, or your just Middle Eastern mosque in the middle of, let's say, city of just Utrecht, Groningen, Amsterdam, you have not any. I don't think if that is going to happen anymore. There are some majestic big mosques that happens a couple of decades before, but again, even if the new construction happens, it's usually outskirts of the city, so it does not affect the landscape or the urban design of the city, for example. And of course, the whole sound around it. For example, again, if someone dies, we pray Quran, for example, and the whole rituals around it. You do not see it. It migrates in a domestic realm or in a certain spaces. Okay, someone dies. We have, for example, the ritual inside the mosque. People come, say the prayer to the soul, and that's it. Basically, it does not get out.
Mhm.
I think the whole clashes happen between culture, but the whole ideas around the whole, otherness. Because a dangerous other could be, hey, some stuff can happen. You do not know if it's going to escalate into some dangerous thing, or also the most majority of this whole, rituals and cultural and ethnic aspect of it. These are basically not European.
Alright, thank you. Ya, Ustadz Taufik, karena religious practice, praktik-praktik agama, ritual menjadi hal yang sangat domestik, yang sangat private, itu menjadikan di konteks Europe itu lebih sulit. Kemudian apabila diterapkan, menurut Reza, yang terjadi misalnya seperti contoh Islamisasi di Indonesia itu contoh misalnya top down, meskipun bukan oleh pemerintah, misalnya pemerintah kota atau pemerintah yang resmi dalam arti yang resmi, tapi juga misalnya struktur sosial, struktur komunitas yang ada di lingkungan itu bisa menggerakkan secara dari atas ke bawah, sehingga contoh Islamisasi kultur lokal itu bisa terjadi. Beliau mencontohkan misalnya saja ketika kita bangun masjid di Europe, kita tidak bisa sekonyong-konyong merubah desain masjid misalnya itu untuk terlalu mencolok begitu. Itu dari aspek bangunan saja tidak semudah itu, sehingga beberapa gereja yang berkonversi menjadi masjid, bangunannya masih desain utamanya masih seperti yang sebelumnya, seperti itu. Sorry kalau tidak lengkap menjelaskannya. Thank you, Ustaz.
Thank you, Mister. Thank
Thank
you.
Alright, Reza, Prof. Suhairi, dan Bapak Ibu semua. I think Prof. Suhairi ada closing atau penyampaian ke Prof. Reza.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. There is one last question, Bu Nur Laila.
Masih ada waktu Pak ini untuk bertanya?
Oke, sebenarnya sudah habis, tapi oke lah. Satu pertanyaan Ibu, silakan singkat
Iya,
saja.
terima kasih sebelumnya. Ini di Manado selesai maghrib, jadi tidak dengar semua ini pemateri dari
Baik, Ibu.
Bapak. Ya, tapi menarik sekali pengalaman akhir tahun itu. Saya sempat ke Amsterdam, Masya Allah. Itu di sana, alhamdulillah, Eropa sana ternyata persahabatan, pergaulan dengan kaum minoritas itu ternyata sejuk, mendamaikan. Dan tidak ada diskriminasi seperti itu. Apalagi kan waktu itu karena lihat cucu, kebetulan cucu saya di Jerman itu lahir di Bad Skorosna, kemudian diajak ke Amsterdam melihat Universitas Albon kalau nggak salah itu. Terus ada mahasiswa juga S3-nya di Jawa, tapi dia minatnya di apartemen Amsterdam. Saya tadinya takut-takut karena berhijab jangan sampai ada yang seperti diskriminasi. Ternyata alhamdulillah, ternyata Jerman itu negara Eropa itu aman untuk kita datangi di sana. Tidak ada semacam kecurigaan kok, jangan dibeda dengan negara-negara lain itu. Ternyata Jerman ini tanah Eropa ini alhamdulillah
Aman ya Bu ya.
iya.
Baik.
Anak saya itu kan dari Leipzig, Universitas Leipzig. Dia juga khawatir tadinya kan satu-satunya dari mahasiswa, dia kan satu-satunya berhijab. Ternyata di sana diizinkan untuk sholat atau misalnya tidak ada gangguan gitu. Jadi saya rasanya aman gitu karena dengan Jadi pertanyaan saya, maaf, ini kan satu saat nanti jangan sampailah terjadi seperti itu. Nah, apa kiat-kiat untuk kita supaya ada semacam harapan dan di pemerintah Eropa sana supaya yang berhijab ini tidak ada seperti diskriminasi gitu. Karena waktu ke Perancis itu di Berlin terus terang ada juga yang wajah-wajah masuk ke mall gitu, masuk ke toko perbelanjaan itu wajah-wajah ada juga yang semasa ekstrim gitu kalau lihat orang yang berhijab gitu. Jadi ya mudah-mudahan dengan pemerintah Jerman bisa juga supaya Eropa ini aman-aman untuk orang-orang yang berhijab. Ya lebih dan kurangnya dimaafkan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Reza, so
Yes.
Nur Laila basically told her story, feeling very safe, traveling to Europe, Amsterdam, to Germany too. And her daughter, her grandchild are feeling safe there, alhamdulillah. And regarding the phenomenon of this negative encounter, she asks, are there any maybe what is that? Institutional effort from the government there to promote, to introduce to all people in, let's say, for example, in Netherlands, telling them that we are actually equal, Muslims are actually safe, not dangerous, or something like that. Is there anything like that?
Yeah. Oh, basically, there are several practices that is happening. First is just if you encounter any negative experience and you are again sure or you can prove that is unjust. For example, public transport. It's interesting. After I conducted my Ph.D. and I disseminated the books and some talks here and there, it's been almost since 2 years ago. You see some labels in case of negative experience. Call these number, for example. That's interesting. Some stuff happens, and then of course you have CCTVs here and there, and basically, yes, you are a victim. You call, and there is proof on it, and basically you can do something. The other example is just diversity training. There is no code, basically, especially for people in a systemic or institutional situation. Hey, as let's say a tram driver, as a train conductor, there are many people coming and going. These are the cultural symbols and the way they do that. For example, these are Sikh people, these are Muslim people, they are Jewish people, so on and so forth. And these are the way people do that. Some sort of cultural training. So these experiences are okay, but again, negative not. But again, these are the people that do stuff. they present themselves, and it's okay. You don't have to be hostile about this. It has nothing to do wrong. It's part of the whole diversity. But again, if this stuff, negative thing happens, you do know what to do, for example, how to de-escalate, or how to know when something is going to happen. So you simply read the room as a conductor, and basically before something happens, you do that. In a broader perspective, yes, that's part of the educational training, especially in the book. I conclude that many stuff happens on everyday spaces within everyday people, but then the education, that training should come through two channels. First, education, especially primary school. So from the get-go, from the beginning, kids are exposed to difference. So they are okay to experience, okay, there are different ways of being, there are different cultures, there are different religious practices. Not everyone is Christian. We have Jews, we have Hindus, we have Muslims, we have Buddhists, and basically it is okay to be this way. And at least you know about Ramadan, you know about Hanukkah, you know about the temples, and so on. So at least you have some experiences. The other one, and is most important and the trickiest part, is media. Media plays a huge role, and media has its own agenda. It doesn't matter left or right, they basically promote certain ideas. And that's the tricky part. That's a kind of independent, just media to report and cover and promote the true, but like a truth also quite contested thing. That's the whole tricky moment of it. Then if education and the media is kind of in a just and inclusive way, basically so many of these negative encounters are automatically eliminated. Again, in for example, universities, in companies, almost all of them have some sort of, again, diversity training, inclusion training, for example. There's a whole possibility, okay, we have different employees, we have different cultural background, and this stuff basically are totally normal if someone is just, during Ramadan, no one drinks. Or if, for example, is Muslim man or Muslim woman does not shake the opposite gender, shake hands with the opposite gender, or there's no hugging, for example, is basically part of their religious practices. So this stuff is happening. But then not everyone basically follow. Not again back to the whole cultural human capital investment, or some people basically just they have their own preferences, and despite the whole training, they're just stubborn, and stuff happen. But again, back to answering her question, yes, there are no channels in practice. You can channel, you can divert the negative experiences. There are some ways to just promote inclusion, and it's working. But then how inclusive these diversity training are, then it's another aspect of it. Maybe it's part of this whole institutional ethnography, for example. Hey, how this training is actually implemented and what are the effects of it. Then it allows a follow-up, for example, research can be done.
All right. Thank you, Reza. That's a very clear explanation. It's good to hear that there is so-called like diversity or inclusion training in company and university. Ibu siapa tadi? Nurlela. Betul, jadi kalau dari kiat-kiat atau upaya pemerintah di sana, betul sudah ada. Dari perspektif yang lebih luas, media dan pendidikan di sana menjadi salah satu cara untuk mempromosikan, mengenalkan ide keberagaman. Tadi Reza menyebutkan kalau di perusahaan-perusahaan dan universitas itu selalu ada yang namanya diversity training atau inclusion training, semacam pelatihan pemberian wawasan tentang diversity, keberagaman, kemajemukan, sehingga harapan mereka orang bisa semakin saling memahami, Orang Kristen punya Christmas, akan merayakan Christmas. Orang Muslim saat Ramadan mungkin di waktu siang tidak makan siang, orang akan saling memahami. Meskipun tentu saja upaya-upaya pemerintah belum menghilangkan sepenuhnya fenomena negatif yang tadi disebutkan. Tapi sudah ada upaya untuk ke sana. Baik, thank you very much, Reza. We do appreciate your share. This is a very meaningful and insightful discussion. I hope we always keep in touch. We might invite you in person to visit us in Lampung, in Sumatera, Indonesia.
Lovely. I was in Lampung before. I went to Bandar Lampung 2 years ago, and we had part of Leiden University. We had MOU there, and it was I loved it. I loved it, and I really enjoyed it. And I've been to different parts of Indonesia, of course, Jakarta, Jogja, Bintan, Surakarta, all around them. Yes, I really enjoyed it around it. Yes, and of course, again, Sumatra, but again, your university, unfortunately not. Hopefully at some point, inshallah. But yeah,
our university is actually 1 hour, 1.5 hours from the Bandar Lampung.
Bandar Lampung to up, yeah. And again, if it's the case, because I've been asked to have a series of presentation, hopefully next week, I already mentioned that I'm going to focus. So that was an embodied aspect of it, basically methodology and theory.
Yeah.
Hopefully on when is the 4th, which is next Thursday, I'm going to actually focus on Indonesian context and social media. So I'm going to talk about digital Islam and social media, and especially on Indonesian social media, how, for example,
Halo, Reza? Bapak Ibu?
Iya.
Sepertinya punya Reza ya yang mati. Jadi beliau akan tetap jadi dosen tamu di Pasca dan akan menyampaikan next meetingnya menyampaikan tentang Islam di dunia digital di konteks Indonesia, Bapak Ibu. Dari tim panitia ini bagaimana? Reza keluar, mungkin terpental ya.
Iya, terpental.
Iya, Prof.
Ternyata kadang sinyal juga bermasalah di sana ya.
Iya benar, Prof. Nggak tahu di sana jam berapa ini, tadi belum cek. Ini bisa jadi. Tapi ini keren sekali sih, Prof. Beliau jadi dosen tamu ya, Prof? Dosen maksudnya yang berapa pertemuan gitu ya?
Iya, jadi kita jadwalkan setiap semester ya. Dalam satu semester ya. Ini insya Allah 3 kali ya.
3 kali.
Beliau akan menyampaikan.
Oke. Nanti yang kontak langsung Pak Imam atau siapa, Pak? Biar menyampaikan ini, mungkin nanti dia masuk, kita udah selesai.
Oh iya. Ya, terpental ya.
Sepertinya ya nih, Bro. Belum masuk lagi nih.
Ya, mungkin nanti tim manajemen ya yang punya kontaknya nanti tolong dikomunikasikan dan sampaikan terima kasih dan apresiasi sudah berbagi dengan kita pada kesempatan ini ya. Dan insya Allah kita akan bertemu lagi dengan beliau di pertemuan yang akan datang ya. Dan terima kasih kepada Pak Mazkur yang sudah memandu acara ini dan tim manajemen yang sudah memfasilitasi dan semua peserta ya, mahasiswa Pascasarjana, dan termasuk tadi ada Prof. Dahlia dari Yayan Pontianak, ada Bu Nur Laila Harun ini dari Manado ya tadi menyampaikan luar biasa.
Yayan Manado.
Iya, terima kasih banyak ya. Dan mungkin bisa ditutup Pak Mazkur. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our guest lecture session. Kita ada di penghujung acara kuliah umum pada sore hari ini. Terima kasih yang sebesarnya kepada Direktur Pasca, Profesor Heri, dan tim semuanya yang telah berjuang keras untuk mengadakan kegiatan ini, kepada para dosen, para peserta semuanya dari berbagai daerah. Terima kasih sudah berpartisipasi aktif. Semoga kita semua mendapatkan manfaat yang banyak dari kegiatan ini. Saya Ahmad Madkur sebagai moderator pada kesempatan hari ini. Mohon maaf atas segala kekurangan. Saya akhiri. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Sebelum kita tutup ya.
Madkur, Pak Reza masuk lagi tuh.
Happened. Yeah. Sorry, my internet went away, came back, so
Okay.
it's really over. That is okay.
Alright. Yeah. We actually just closed the session.
Okay, so sorry, my internet simply just, I have a blackout, so my internet and the whole electricity went away. Sorry of my life.
That's okay. I already tell the audience that you can have the next meeting talking about the social Indonesian context of
Islam.
digital Islam in social media.
Yeah, inshallah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We do
Okay, thank you
appreciate
very much, everyone, and hopefully see you next week.
next week.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Wabarakatuh.
Baik Bapak Ibu, kita tutup dengan hamdalah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin.
Oke, Prof, terima kasih banyak semuanya.
Terima kasih, Prof.
Ya, sama-sama.
Terima kasih Prof. Soeri.
Wah, ini ada Prof Azmi ini. Tadi nggak muncul.
Muncul tadi, tapi kadang dimatiin juga karena kebetulan saya ngajar juga.
Oke.